Hello and welcome everybody to another edition of the ATACS podcast. That's adults talk about cool stuff. That's who we are, and we are going to talk about cool stuff. Today's date is October 17th, 2021. I am Flex from Raleigh, North Carolina. Joining me today on this two-man show is Nate from Clayton, North Carolina. How's it going, Nate?
Howdy. Doing all right.
Are you ready to talk about cool stuff?
I think that this game is pretty cool stuff.
I'm not sure.
Are you ready to talk about cool stuff?
I'm not sure how I feel about this one. But we'll get into it. Today's topic of discussion is the video game called Deathloop.
Deathloop.
Mm-hmm. Our one spoiler warning up front is that we are going to spoil this game. Anything and everything is on the table, no holds barred. So we're going to talk about whatever we want to talk about with Deathloop. And if you do not want any spoilers of any kind, you should leave now. This is your one warning.
Hey, guess what? In this game, there's a loop.
What?
You die, and the loop starts over.
Oh man, you spoiled me. Come on, you gotta warn me. Yeah, that's our disclaimer out of the way. But yes, we're going to talk about looping. We're going to talk about dying in this loop. And I guess just a really quick upfront thing is just a weird comment is this is a video game owned by Microsoft that is on the PlayStation 5, but not on any Xbox consoles.
It is on PC, but it's not on Xbox. It is a PlayStation console exclusive for 1 year.
Yeah,
because of the deal that was made before Microsoft acquired Bethesda and Arcade.
Yep, it is a very strange set of circumstances that has led to this scenario. And I don't even think on PC it's on the Microsoft or Xbox or whatever they call it store, the Windows store. Like I think it's just on like Steam or Epic or wherever.
That's probably right. I don't know that for sure, but that's probably right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it'll come to Xbox in a year, but
it'll be on Game Pass next year. So
yeah, if you're on Xbox and not PlayStation, you'll be fine. You'll get it for free in a year if you're assuming you're on Game Pass. Which
I don't know why you would be on the Xbox ecosystem and not be on Game Pass.
You own an Xbox without Game Pass at this point. It's kind of odd to me, but anyway, you do you. That little tangent aside, yeah. So I think both of us played it on PlayStation 5. I did. I assume you did.
Yeah.
So I do want to mention that up front, just so we know where we played it.
Did not have that precise mouse and keyboard aiming that PC players enjoy.
So I don't think you need it unless you were trying to do a lot of multiplayer, which we'll get into later. So yeah, we're going to just dive into it. This has been probably one of the most hotly anticipated games of 2021 and reviewed very well. And we may have some differing opinions on it, but to get started, I think we're just going to talk about like the kind of intro segment to the game, because the game kind of has a protracted tutorial of sorts, which the game is kind of busy mechanically, so I can kind of, I think, understand why they did the tutorial the way that they did.
It is busy mechanically, and I would even say they try to introduce all the narrative knots right away, like try to give you all the mysteries right up front to get you hooked, I think. So they spend a lot of time at the beginning with tutorializing the game mechanics, which are pretty dense, and then also trying to introduce the characters in the world. So it is a pretty long tutorial.
Hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess just to ask the blatant question out front, like, do you think that tutorial worked, like, for both introducing the story stuff up front and also mechanically? Like, do you think it worked?
It worked fine for me. I had heard going in before I started that it had a lengthy tutorial section, so I think expecting that probably put me in the right mindset where it wasn't a big deal. I could see if I was going in blind, excited about getting into the loop, I could see that have felt a little slow and bogged down for sure.
Yeah. Did you follow? I can't remember if during that tutorial segment if it was optional or not, because it was a lot of like, oh, go to this time segment, do this
Mhm.
thing, leave, go to this other time segment. Like it was very clearly trying to like give you a sense of what the flow of the game was with the four different time slots of the day and how stuff persisted between loops and, you know, all of this stuff. I don't remember if those waypoints were if you could turn them off at that point or if you had to kind of get out of the tutorial. I definitely got bored of the tutorial section. I don't know if I just wrapped my head around stuff before it was over, which was probably aided by I listened to a lot of gaming podcasts, so like I kind of had a good idea of what the game was before I even started playing it. So that probably helped me personally. I think for someone who literally knew nothing about the game going in, other than oh, this looks kind of cool and Sony's promoting it or whatever. I'm guessing it's probably needed like for the average person
Yeah.
who's not like super jacked in. Um, I could see that being needed because it is a pretty busy game, and I think the tutorial did a pretty decent job at kind of explaining the ropes. I think I got bored specifically of not being able to infuse stuff earlier because
Yeah.
if I remember correctly, that was kind of like the last thing they got to. Like that was kind of like the moment where they took the training wheels off and the tutorial was kind of over. Was like that was kind of the last mechanic they introduced was the infusing.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's right. And I don't remember exactly how many time periods and locations you visit during that tutorial, but it goes through at least one full day of the loop cycle. It might be 2 days, I don't remember for sure. But yeah, it kind of all leads up to you being able to infuse items with the residuum resource that you can gather from random objects or killing visionaries. And being able to keep items and upgrades between runs. That's sort of the whole point of the tutorial. Narratively is, and I guess mechanically is that Colt is figuring out how to do that, um, which is pretty good. I think like just kind of directs you through a couple of the maps, shows you that things change throughout the day and different time slots that you can explore map you chose in the time slot you chose, and it's not a real time thing. And then figuring out at the end, like, oh, okay, I can start to pick guns and perks and abilities that I like to assist from run to run. So I think it does a good job at explaining all of that. And I do think, like you said, if you came into this just from like the promotional material, like, hey, cool shooter, like neat looking characters and a cool concept of a time loop. Think the like locations and time jumping and all of that would be a lot to absorb if it just dropped you into the loop and said, I don't know, figure it out.
Yeah, this game definitely needs some level of tutorializing. Whether they nailed it perfectly or not, I'm not sure, but I think they got it close enough. Like I think it works.
Yeah.
And as you were talking, I think they did do two full loops in the tutorial because I feel like they did show you like, oh, when one loop ends, you go back to the start and you don't have anything. Like I feel like that was part of the tutorial,
I
and
think
I
you're right, yeah.
and I think they also sent you to the same location at different times on different days or something to like try and show you that oh like
Mm.
hey this zone's different than it was the last time you went to it because you went to it at a different time.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if it's worth actually describing all this structure that you learned in the tutorial to our listeners, because I'm assuming if you've listened to this, you kind of know that there are 4 time slots in a
Yeah.
day. This day loops over and over. You go morning, what is it? Morning, afternoon, evening, and night, or something like that.
Morning, noon, afternoon, and in evening.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
then yeah, if you haven't broken the loop at the end of the evening or died, then
hmm
it just starts over.
hmm
Um,
And you go through those 4 time slots in order, and at each time slot, you have one of 4 locations you can go to.
yes. You can
Um,
go to every location in one day, but the locations change sometimes pretty dramatically at
mhm.
different times of day, both in terms of enemy placements and which routes are open or closed. Different areas of the maps will completely be open or closed off based on the time of day. So they definitely vary, and some of them, undergo an aesthetic change, like a snowstorm comes through most of the island later in the day. So like, yeah, it's a neat system. I think it does something that like isn't super common in games where you have these 4 maps that are the geometry doesn't necessarily change, but you are revisiting them under different conditions and trying to optimize a path through your particular loop. And I think that is a cool idea that works pretty well.
yeah. In effect, it kind of turns into you basically have 16 levels. You got 4 different levels at 4 different times a day, and they change at the times a day. So it's kind of like 16 different levels.
Mm.
Um, I did find myself wishing there was more change between, like, in a location between the time slots, because they do, like, yes, I think the first 2 time slots, there's no snow, and then the third one, there's some snow, and the fourth one, there's a lot of snow because the snow comes later in the day. Um, and, that changes some things, like I'm bad at remembering the names of the levels, but um, there's one level where there's like kind of an underground or like some areas in this mountain, and if you go later in the day, the water lowers and or some of it freezes over with ice, so you can actually like cross under this
Yeah.
bridge and get into this cave area that early in the day there's just too much water and you can't swim in this game, so you just can't get in there. Um,
Yeah, funny aside that they treat water as just completely toxic in this game.
yeah,
You can't even like walk in knee-high water without just taking damage constantly.
yeah, which is really silly. Like, I mean, I get why they do it from a gameplay perspective, like they clearly have design intentions around that, but
Yeah,
it
it's
makes
very silly.
it makes the game feel more restrictive than I feel like I feel like they're trying to make it this kind of openish game, and then you can't even go in water. Um, it's very weird.
Or
But
cults just
I guess,
allergic to large bodies of water.
yeah. But I feel like, and tell me if you feel differently about this. I feel like they could have done more stuff. Like I feel like that's the like very surface level way of treating that time mechanic of like, oh, in the morning there's too much water. In, the evening you can walk through there because it's frozen over. Like I feel like that's a very like it is neat, but it's also like it's kind of like the bare minimum you could do with that. And I feel like there's not enough like dynamic kind of things where like you do something in a level and it triggers something in that same level later if you were to go back, or triggers something in a different level. Like there's some of that with like the visionaries, which we'll get to, where like, oh, you can do something that'll cause a visionary to go somewhere else. But I feel like in terms of like level layout geometry changing, there's really not much of that.
There
Um,
isn't much of you affecting the geometry for sure, which I think there would, like you say, there would be an opportunity to maybe do something like that. Um, I don't think that I missed that necessarily, but it would have been cool to have. Um, I think that some of the stuff they do with character interactions and um, occasionally some things you do can affect other areas or future time slots that I think is fine, and it conveys what they're sort of trying to do. But yeah, they could have gone bigger, and that would have been cool.
Yeah, I think the main thing I felt like changed was more of just like I don't know. There's a lot more landmines and gun turrets later in the day.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely true, especially in the complex. If you
Yeah,
go there in the evening, it's just like booby trapped all all over.
yeah, and or more guards in general. They just put more obstacles in the maps later in the day, so they're tougher. And I feel like they kind of did that. I would assume just as like, oh, they assume you're collecting better stuff as the day goes, but like at some point that stops becoming true because you've
Yeah,
infused so much stuff that like your loadout's not changing between the morning and the evening.
yeah. Some of
Like,
that stuff is reactive, I think. I'm pretty sure to what you've done so far in that loop. Like, pretty confident that if you kill visionaries early in the day, and I don't know if there's a specific number or specific ones, that like areas become much more heavily guarded by armed resistance. And I know if you go to one of the things that I noticed is that if I've killed a couple of visionaries and end up in Updam, the city area, um, at night, which is a pretty common one to go to at night because there's the specific party event there. If you've killed a couple of visionaries before that point, then like there are some events that could trigger where like people come over the loudspeaker, not one of the visionaries, just like regular people, and they're just like, "Oh, you're ruining everything, and you're the reason we have to be out here tonight because you're just doing nonsense,
yeah,
and we're gonna find you and hunt you down." And they like try to lay traps for you, and I thought that was kind of fun because like
right.
that doesn't happen if you don't
Mm,
really do anything significant and then end up there in the evening. It's not quite the same level of like antagonistic presence.
gotcha. Yeah, I didn't quite pick up on that. Um, but yeah, I think that stuff's good. I guess I just kind of wish they had done more with it.
Yeah, that's
And
fair.
yeah, and I kind of want to get your thoughts on this as like a quote unquote time loop game. Speaking of that, because like when I think of other time loop games, like I feel like they do have more dramatic things that you do that influences the course of the loop, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Um, but I also don't think this is really a time loop game in the same sense that we think of like when someone says time loop, I think more of like a Majora's Mask or an Outer Wilds or some games from this year like 12 Minutes or The Forgotten City, stuff like that. And in all of those cases, like time is actively moving.
Yeah,
And so like if you just sit still, it's going to get to the end of the loop and start over. Whereas time loop is four discrete time chunks, and when you go into a time chunk, time isn't moving until you exit the
yeah,
level. Like it's you can spend as
yeah.
much time as you want in there, so it's not really the same thing.
It's
Um,
not. I think that there's a key distinction. It's not really an active clock ticking,
mhm.
um, which gives it a little bit more of like a puzzle, I guess, puzzle element to it. Although I don't know that that puzzle element is really the focus of the game. It's more of like give you these sim levels to explore. And my guess is that, I think correctly, in my opinion, they decided early on, like, it's sort of against the idea of an immersive sim to put a clock ticking on the player, because they want you to explore and hack into things and find all the secret routes and hidden notes explaining the lore of the world and all that stuff.
Yeah, I do think for the type of game they've made with like how big and how dense the levels are and how like kind of stuff there is defined, I think being on a time clock would probably be more frustrating because I mean, Majora's Mask is a little longer, but when you think of something like the Outer Wilds or those other examples, like the loop is like 20, 30 minutes tops. Um,
Hmm.
and in Deathloop, like I'm spending way more time than that. If I'm like, unless I'm just doing something specific and getting in and out, which in those cases it can be pretty quick. But if like I'm taking
Yeah.
my time to explore, like you're not really getting a whole lot done in 20 minutes or so.
No, you might get one area done in 20, 30 minutes,
Mhm.
which would be a fourth of the day.
Yeah, which yeah, that would be pretty restrictive, I think. Um, but yeah, so it's not quite a time loop game in the same sense, but I do think that that works fine.
Mhm.
Um, so I guess as far as like kind of the next thing you do after that intro is, and you learn how to infuse, which is spending your resources to make stuff permanently persist. It kind of like takes off the reins. Like you can kind of do whatever you want, and it tracks a whole bunch of stuff in your menu, your log.
Yeah.
It kind of
Yeah,
says like,
despite
go ahead.
despite the lengthy tutorial, I feel like it still kind of drops you in and you have all these like big flowcharts of leads to follow, and it's kind of like, yeah, but what should I actually do? And the answer is it doesn't actually matter. You just pick something and do it, and like one thing
Yeah,
will lead to another, and you'll eventually fill out what you need. So I think it's fine, but it's still like kind of funny that they have these hours long tutorials explaining the game's systems and how it works and what you're doing, and then opens it up and is like, "All right, go," and you're just kind of like, "Well, um,
yeah,
guess I'll just pick this random thing and see what happens."
yeah. I definitely felt somewhat overwhelmed when they just drop you in and they're like, "Oh, there's all this stuff," and like
Yeah,
I'm not sure. I don't think I like a lot of the menus in that game. Like it's
yeah,
pretty cluttered and busy and like kind of hard to figure out.
hard to
Like,
navigate.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
just hard to parse all the information. It's just like a very cluttered info dump kind of situation.
I agree, especially at the beginning when you're trying to figure out like what you can do and what might be optimal. It's just like there's too many variables here, and I can't really synthesize all of it.
Yeah.
And even late game when you're like build out most of the leads that you have, I still spent too much time just like scrolling around that menu trying to like make sure I understood what I needed to do. I agree with you that that information could be presented better for sure.
Yeah, and I wasn't planning on getting to this yet, but this is the perfect moment for it that we've set up. Is I feel like, I mean, they might have gotten to this anyway, but I feel like, so they have both the ars in the menu. There's a tab for arsenal leads, which point you to slabs and later specific guns, like unique
Mm.
guns. And the slabs are your main powers. And then there's another one for the visionary leads, which has a thread for all of the main visionaries, which your goal in the game is to kill all the visionaries in one day, which is what
Yeah.
breaks the loop. Um, and then there are other tabs for like codex entries and other stuff. I very quickly said, "Oh, this additional page of like lore stuff, I'm never going to read because that's way too much info." Um, and they put it in a lore tab, which means it's not relevant to gameplay. Um, um, but in both of the Arsenal and the Visionary leads tabs, you can click on any lead in either of those, and the game just waypoints you to your next objective in that lead. So it very clearly, like,
Yeah.
you know, if you make use of that, you never have to think about where to go. You never
Yeah.
actually have to like piece anything together in your head. And to me, that's a very strange choice. It's I'm conflicted about it because on the one hand, I feel like that takes out any of the puzzle solving. Like you can play this game as a very linear follow the waypoint game and never do any puzzle solving. Um,
Mhm.
there might be a little bit of light stuff that's kind of not explained or fully clear if you're just blindly following waypoints. So you might need to pay a little bit more attention than that. But I think for most things, you really can just follow the waypoint and you're going to beat the game just fine. Um,
Mhm.
on the other hand, because of the way all of the menus are so cluttered and in my mind, it kind of poorly presents stuff, I was happy to have the waypoints because I think without them, it would just be kind of frustrating to parse it on your own. And all the information is there. Like, I think you could read through stuff and,
Mhm.
um, you know, it wouldn't be that confusing where to go, but I feel like the time it would have taken me to like actually parse it through the menus and how cluttered it is like I don't want to even I don't know, this is just kind of a mess. Like I feel like there's just a presentation issue with that. And I don't know what led them to do the waypoints, but I almost read it as like, oh, this is so cluttered. We're going to take the easy way out and just give people waypoints. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, and I think that is part of it. Is like we know players are going to get frustrated with this structure and with the environments. Um, so we'll just give waypoints that point you to what you need to do. So I think it's good to have that option. I don't know whether I fall on the side of it should be on or off by default. Should probably like I don't know after the tutorial just like ask you, do you want like how much waypointing do you want, and maybe just put it on the player at that point. I don't know if that would be better or worse. Um,
Yeah.
I turned off the HUD waypoints from the start because I had read some people saying that they wish they had done that. um, because, like you said, it just kind of leads you by the nose, and you don't really have to think about anything if you just drop into levels and it says, "Okay, go over here. That's where he is. Go get him."
Mhm.
Um, I turned those off, and I did like that I could still in the menu between like when you're in your base prepping to go into the next level. I still like that I had the leads to point me to which places had different options in them. But when I got into the level, it was then on me to figure out where things were and how to access them. And I think it did legitimately make the game take a lot longer for me than it does for a lot of people because I spent so much time just exploring those levels and like figuring out pathways or how to access things or where the person even or objective even was in the level. Like literally just had to explore those levels and learn them to some degree. And so while that doesn't make a huge difference on in every case, I feel like there are two different paths there depending on how much and holding you want, I guess.
Yeah. I would be willing to bet that for like the average player, and if they did a lot of focus testing, like I would be willing to bet that uh, data falls on the side of most players will want the waypoint. Um,
For sure.
but there could be because like I don't think it was ever obvious to me that you could turn them off. So like if I
They
hadn't
could
heard,
surface that better for sure.
yeah, I do think there could be benefit in surfacing it better because I do think the players who get really into this game are probably the type of players who would prefer to play it without the waypoint, if that makes
Yeah,
sense. Um,
definitely.
so like the super fans, I think would prefer to play that way, and you want to give them that experience and like hope they find that experience.
Mhm.
Um, I do think for people who maybe don't have as much time or aren't as into it or whatever, like I think the waypoint option is certainly nice. Like I'm glad that option's in there. But it could make it a somewhat different game for sure. Like you said, it probably takes a lot longer if you're not using the waypoints. I am really curious if any. It sounds like most stuff was still pretty obvious or straightforward. So it sounds like for maybe a good chunk of the game, it didn't make a huge difference. But I am curious if there's anything in did you, so first, did you play the entire game without waypoints? And then second, in whatever portion of the game you played, sounds like the whole game without waypoints, was there anything that like really tripped you up and felt like took you a much longer time because you weren't using waypoints?
Not sure I'm going to come up with any specifics off the top of my head, but I 100% had multiple times where I basically cleared a whole map in my head and just like could not figure out where the thing I was trying to find was. Like I knew what I was trying to find. I knew generally what I was looking for, and I just wasn't finding the pathway there, or wasn't putting together that like, oh, I needed to go about it a different way. So there was one time, and this actually I think is on me more than the waypoint, not having the waypoint, is that I tried to find so there's a level where you can get two of the visionaries, Fia and Charlie, together. I think is right. They're secretly lovers, and they go to their secret lover hideout and do secret lover things. And
Yes.
you can ambush them and kill them both at once. And there's a way to get to that door only at a specific time of day. I was just kind of looking at the notes I had and like what I had learned. They would be there, and somehow was there at the wrong time of day, and like spent forever combing this level,
No.
trying to find
Oh,
their secret hideout.
yeah, so you don't know. It sounds like you're not clear right now whether that was you misreading something or if they just didn't present it well.
It was me, because if I had paid more attention at that loadout menu where you're picking locations, I would have seen that it wasn't highlighting that option for that time of day and that location. But once I loaded into the level,
Hmm.
didn't have anything telling me that that was no longer an option. Do you know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and on the like the loadout page or the, when you're at your base,
Yeah.
it does have icons for which visionaries are at which location at your current time.
Yeah. So like that level was helpful to me in picking what level to go to at what times, and it's very clear. So clearly I just messed that up in this particular case. Like it's very clear what you can and can't do at specific locations and times. But
Yeah.
that was one time I got kind of frustrated, and was probably on me. But there were times where I just wasn't finding the right path um,
Hmm.
to access something for a long time, and then I would eventually stumble across it, and it wouldn't have been an issue if there was a waypoint. Um,
Yeah, so correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like it was a case of like you knew what you were looking for and what you had to do, you just weren't sure where in the level it was.
right. Yes. Like there would be a part of the level that I just was missing, um,
Mhm.
that I needed to get to, that I wasn't aware where it was or how to get there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And there was one of I feel like even using waypoints, there was one or two cases of that. I feel like the first time I killed, is it Harriet who's in the hangar? Um, the first time I killed her, and maybe I'm misremembering, but I feel like it didn't give me an exact waypoint for her, and it just said she's in hangar 2 or something like that.
Mhm.
And I was like, well, I'm looking for hangar 2, and it wasn't that hard to find. I mean, hangar 2 is pretty big and it has a giant 2 on it, but
But didn't give you a waypoint to get to Hangar 2?
I don't think so.
Yeah. Okay.
And I
So
could be wrong. And I
that's
could be
basically how the whole game was for me, right? Like I would get find a note or get something saying this is in Hangar 2, and I wouldn't have anything telling me where that was on the map. So I would just kind of have to wander around,
yeah,
explore the level, and find Hangar 2. And that was basically how every objective is if you're playing without objective
yeah.
markers.
And that's obviously a much more clear example, but something like finding the lover's hideout or like
Hmm.
um the weird like music key code for Alexis at his party, like to play his song. Like some of those
Right.
seem more intricate than just like, oh, find Hanger 2.
Yeah.
So I think those are the things I was more curious about because the whole thing for the Lover's Hideout is pretty complex because you had to like get you had to like interact with these four symbols like spread throughout this base, and it was like,
Yeah, you had to go to a different place where Fia doing her art projects
mhm,
was she has four specific pieces of art that correlate to the code to enter their secret lover's hideout. And so I eventually found out that that's where I needed to go to get the code to get into the hideout. So like I knew what time of day to get to get to her art studio or whatever to find the code. But once you're in that base, that was a really challenging part of the game actually,
yeah,
because that specific base, you have to find those four pieces of art, and I have no waypoints to tell me where they are in the base. And if you set off alarms in that base, she
yeah,
nukes the whole
yeah,
place.
yeah. So that was the most challenging part of the game for me too. So I can't remember specifically the Hangar 2 part I commented if I just didn't select that lead and therefore didn't have the waypoint, or if I was experimenting with waypoints off,
Right.
or if it actually didn't give you a waypoint. I can't actually remember because that was one of the first things I did in the game. But I'm pretty sure that for the art stuff, it's even using waypoints, it doesn't point you specifically to the art pieces.
That would make
Um,
sense
I think
because
it points you
you're
to the
kind of
general.
given the idea of like you need to go find these. It would be a little weird if they just gave you the
Yeah, I think it just pointed you to the general area and said,
yeah.
"Oh, it's in this zone, but you got to find them in this area."
Yeah,
Um,
so that
but I
was
did,
rough.
yeah. So that segment was also one of the really frustrating parts of the game to me because I think it was the only segment I encountered, but I think it's the only segment in the game where because so your character Colt, his special slab, his special power is you get 3 lives basically. So you can die and it just brings you back to a pretty recent checkpoint, but you keep going, so like you kind of get 2 freebies, um, but I feel like that reactor, yeah, if you trigger her and the reactor goes off, even if you haven't died at all, it just restarts the loop immediately, so it
Yep.
circumvents your spare lives, and that was actually really frustrating to me the first time it happened because I didn't know that could
Yeah,
happen.
they don't tell you that that's a there's probably somewhere you could find information beforehand to like warn you of that. But yeah, if you just go in like I
Yeah,
did most places and like yeah, I'll be stealthy, but like it's gonna be guns blazing at some point because that's how it goes. And
yeah.
like don't I usually don't really worry about it and then it's like oh wait.
Yeah. So, I mean, I had to drastically change how I played the game in that section because, like you said, it's like, oh, most of the game I, try and be stealthy, but, if it goes guns blazing, sure, I can go guns blazing, and I'm pretty good at guns blazing. And also, if I happen to die, I got 2 more chances. So,
Yeah.
like, you can kind of play pretty fast and loose for most of the game, which I do want to talk about this game's difficulty balance.
Mhm.
But that segment, that particular bunker in that game, like you have to be very stealthy. Like you
Right.
cannot go guns blazing. And if it does go gun blazing, you have to either immediately go disable the reactor or immediately go kill Thea before she sets it off. So like you have to, if you get caught, you gotta book it one way or the other.
Yeah.
Um,
Which I think it worked for me because it is more of like a forced stealth section, or yeah, you have to be very quick if you're gonna go the actiony route. Where the rest of the game, like that, it can help to use stealth, but it's really unnecessary for most of the game. Um, I thought that was kind of cool to have a more forced stealth section with a real consequence.
yeah.
Like
I, yeah,
I
I
thought that was
actually,
neat.
yeah, once I recognized what was going on, I actually kind of liked it, and it gave the
Mm.
game stakes that it didn't have anywhere else.
Yeah.
It was really annoying that they didn't tell you like that it wasn't clear how it worked until it
Mhm.
happened because it's just very different from the rest of the game and it's not telegraphed at all.
Yeah.
Um, so like I think there should be clear communication that like, hey, this is a like instant fail section. Um, but I did like the tension it added, and I think I probably would have actually enjoyed the whole game if it had stakes like that
Mhm.
because a little more because like the only time I ever really felt stakes was when there was something that would screw up the entire day's run like that, and that's very rare. I think there might have been there was also something like that at the very end with Alexis. I forget exactly what happened, but somehow he got alerted and that like he went into a state that I couldn't get him anymore. I don't know if he went in like to some lockdown
Huh.
state or whatever, but there was something I was trying to do that I don't even think it was kill him. I think it was trying to do like one of the setup steps or something, but something I
Mhm.
like went in guns blazing basically into his whole castle compound
Yeah.
and I got some kind of notification that was like, "Oh, Alexis has been alerted to our presence, so we can't do what you need to do anymore. You're gonna have to try a different day." And it was like, "Oh,
Uh,
okay." I
some
like
it must
totally
have been
failed.
some other alternate objective because he definitely will just come fight you if he's alerted to you.
Yeah, yeah. I think it was. I think I was following the like the setup path to like
Yeah.
figure out a way to kill him, and it was like I guess it like broke his routine, so that path
Yeah.
wouldn't work.
Yeah, you
But
can't do any of the like the dance thing or the beer thing. You can't do any of those once he's alerted. That's true.
yeah, so I think that's what it was. Which you're right. I'm pretty sure you can still kill Alexis. Like you can
Yes, you
still,
can.
yeah, you can still do other methods, but the way it guides you
Yeah.
on the lead for him wants you to do it a specific way. So I think it canceled that. Which if I had
Yeah.
realized that you could do it other ways, I probably would have just kept going. Um, but it's interesting. Alexis is actually really interesting. I guess we're kind of at a segment here just talking about different
Yeah,
experiences and
that's fine.
leads. But Alexis is interesting in that I feel like most of the visionaries, when you build up to the final, the final loop where you kill all of them, I feel like most of the visionaries you have to kill a very specific way. But I
Hmm.
feel like Alexis is one of the only ones where even in that final loop, you can kind of just do whatever. You can just walk up and murder
Yeah.
him. Like
Yeah.
you don't have to do anything specific. It's just now just go kill him.
Yeah, the
um,
first time I killed him, which I think was like one of my very first loops, just went to that party in the evening, just set up like 7 turrets in front of the party and started shooting, and this swarm of people just come running out into the turrets, and they all died, including him. And I was like, all
yeah,
right, I'll walk away
turrets.
now.
Turrets, by the way, are really powerful in this game.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so he's one of the ones that I think you can just murder. I think is in the final loop is Charlie. Do you just go into his place? No, that's Harriet. Harriet is the first one you do in the final loop, and
Yeah, you
yeah,
have to do Harriet in the morning in Hangar 2.
yeah, and her is just kill in whatever way you want. Um,
Yeah, there's a pretty easy way to do it. Um, that I found at least. But
what was your method?
so if you go into Hangar 2 on the top level while she's like dangling a guy from a crane and she's about to release poison gas, I don't know what she's doing. She's on some crazy cult stuff. And
Yeah,
you can
well,
like, yeah, they all are because
it's all
they're,
crazy.
yeah. You can basically blink around the top level and get behind her, um, and just do a stealth assassination on her pretty easily.
Okay.
Um, that's the way I always did it.
I tried stealthing in that one. I didn't see a way to like actually get behind her because she's like in her little plane cockpit thing and it's behind some locked doors.
Yeah, she's in a bulletproof plane cockpit, like sticking out into the hangar. And there's one. It took me 2 tries to figure this out. There's a spot on the second level where there's a window with a bunch of trip mines guarding it, and you can do the shift through those without triggering them.
Oh, I shifted in there once and it triggered the mines, so I assumed like just shifting through mines triggers them, but maybe it
Yeah.
doesn't if you do it.
If you aim it right, you can shift through trip
Okay,
mines.
interesting.
That way you could climb down and get behind her with
Yeah.
basically no resistance.
The only time I tried to shift through there, the mines went off and killed me. Um,
The first time went to Hangar 2 to try to kill her, I died in the poison gas because I couldn't figure out where to go.
nice.
I think the
Uh,
second time I figured out that you could go through those mines.
yeah. I mean, I did go through the mines, but I just went guns blazing. Like every time I
Yeah.
killed Carrie, it was guns blazing, which the second you like alert her, she actually walks into that room with the mines and is just like,
Oh,
"Where's
really?
Cole? Where's Cole?" And she just like spins in a circle in that room forever, along with like some of her bodyguards. So I would just throw a grenade in there, which would blow her up and also trigger the mines. So she would just like take a ton of damage, and all of her cronies would die, and it would just be her, and I would just sit there and shoot her until she died. um,
Nice.
yeah, hers was one of the weirdest ones with getting alerted because most people become harder once they get alerted, and I feel like she becomes easier when she gets alerted because she just runs into that room and spins in circles.
Right.
um,
I guess her power is not very useful against you because hers is Nexus, right?
if there's Nexus, okay, yeah, I can't
I think
remember
hers,
what hers is.
which doesn't really matter because it's like a
Yeah, that's literally useless.
multi-target thing.
Yeah. By the way, I never did this, but I always thought doing Nexus at Alexis's party would be really hilarious. Just
It's very funny.
Nexus the entire room and just kill them
Yep.
all with one bullet.
That is what I did on the
Yeah.
final loop.
Yeah. I feel like that's pretty cool. I'm sure we'll get to more anecdotes around this stuff later, but I did want to kind of circle back into once you got out of the tutorial area, what was like the first thing you did? For me, I pulled up the arsenal leads and I was like, I want to get all the slabs. I got the Blink one first, shift, whatever it's called.
Yep.
I got that one first, and I just kind of went down the list. I got Nexus, I got all of them. So I was more focused on that, and I did Charlie. Charlie's the one with shift, right?
Yeah, he's the one with Shift who has the weird LARPing
Yeah.
sci-fi alien game.
Which I did him two or three times to get some of the upgrades because I knew, I mean, shift just seemed like such a key ability, and I wanted some of the upgrades. So I kind of grinded him like an extra time or two just to get some upgrades, and then just got all the other slabs once. And eventually, when I realized that killing Julianne, who is that her name? The one person,
Juliana.
Juliana. Sorry, Juliana.
She'll give you a random tablet, yeah.
Yeah, and she invades pretty much all the time. So like
Yep.
you're just always getting random tablets from her. So once I realized that, I was like, oh, I don't need to grind because I'm just going to get stuff from her.
Yeah.
Though I found this incredibly annoying is she can drop ones you already have, even if there are some you
Yes.
don't have. So you can't really be guaranteed to get what you need with her because there was um, Nexus was actually I think the only one I never got all the slabs for, even though it was one I all the upgrades for, even though it was one I used all the time because Juliana just never dropped Nexus ones for me for just I'm sure just pure RNG there, but I just never got Nexus ones from her, and just from killing her, I've got all the upgrades for all the other ones.
Yeah. I don't think I got all the upgrades for all of them, but a lot of them from Juliana because she does come in a lot. Um, Interestingly, the first thing that I did out of the tutorial was I said I'm going to pick a map and learn it,
Mhm.
and go. I went so I did Updom, the city,
Mhm.
because I knew there were two visionaries there, Charlie and Alexis from the leads.
Mhm.
And I was just like, I'm just going to go through this map all 4 time slots and like see what's up in Updom.
See what's up and up, Dom.
And like really learn it and see what all was there. So that was kind
Mhm.
of fun to like go through it
Yeah,
that way.
you're almost like doing the Hitman level thing of
Yeah, it was kind of in the Hitman style of just like I'm gonna play this map over and over and learn it and different ways to do things. Um, that was kind of cool. I got into a lot of really prolonged shootouts in Charlie's LARP theater
Uh,
thing.
I went through his stupid LARP castle so many times, both grinding him early on, but you also have to go through it to accomplish other objectives multiple
Yep.
times. So I went through his thing all the time, and I never found a reliable, like, efficient way really to go through it. Like, I thought once I got shift, I'd be able to like, oh, shift around the outside of building or get up high or whatever. And like, it's certainly possible there's a path I didn't
Yeah.
find,
You
but
kind of can once you get the extended reach shift.
mhm.
I found a way to get. I think I still had to go through like that first room.
Mhm.
But once you go through that and you can get to the outside areas, you can kind of work your way up to the roof, and then you can go anywhere you want.
Okay.
But yeah, you
Yeah.
do go through that area so many times.
Yeah. And this kind of gets to a bigger point in the game is like, and I did find a way to circumvent like a couple floors, but I still had to go through some area that every time. But like, I probably went through that LARP dungeon at least 7, 8 times during the
Yeah,
course of the game because you have to interact with that computer for a later objective too, and you have to do
that's
that multiple times. You have to like get some recording and go to the computer and like then go back again later for something, and like it's just you have a lot of back and forth, and like that LARP dungeon's pretty big, and I
there's a
think
lot of guys in there.
there's a lot of enemies in there. Yeah, like
If you go into full alert and just like decide to make it a shootout, it just takes a while to work your way
yeah,
through the hordes of enemies.
yeah, and I think that was the main area in the game that like I did it early, and the first time or two I went through, it was kind of fun, but Charlie's LARP dungeon was the main area that by the end of the game, I was like, I'm just so tired of doing this over and over. Like, it's not hard at this point because I have such good gear.
Yeah,
It's just annoying. Like, it's just kind of a nuisance. And like, I think that's the area of this game that I think the more I played it, the more frustrated I got of like, they don't really, I feel like, give you like you never really get to a point where you can outright skip the things that you have to do over and over. Like you still have to do, like you might be able to circumvent some of it, but there's still parts of it that you're going to have to do repeatedly.
mm,
And I think some of that stuff, like Charlie's LARP dungeon in particular, is just not interesting enough once you do it more than 2 or 3 times. Like I think it just gets boring.
yeah,
Um, so I think given the nature of the game that you're replaying these levels a lot, I think I would have liked it a lot if there were clearer and more efficient ways to not have to repeat things, basically.
yeah. And I do think most stuff you don't have to repeat, like the art reactor area. You only have to complete that once
hmm
to be able to do the final loop, which I think is a good thing. It would suck to have to do that a bunch.
Yeah.
Even though
I
I
mean,
really like that area.
yeah, I only had found the art once, but I did go through the area 2 or 3 times because I went through once just to kill Fia, just to get her
Mhm.
slab. Um, and then I guess I did it for the art thing. Like I definitely did that sequence more than once, but yeah, it wasn't
Yeah.
as like Charlie's thing is I think one of the worst offenders because
Is the definitely the worst offender for like they're actually mainline objectives you can't do all at once. And it's one of the more obvious ones to go to early game, I think,
yeah, for sure.
because it's in the morning and it's in Updom, which you kind of do a couple times in the tutorial. Like I think that's one that like probably most players do pretty early.
Yeah, and because he has the shift slab that I
Yeah,
think a lot of players are going to prioritize, and I think even in the way it orders the leads, I think it kind of like tries to
yeah,
point you to that one first.
yeah. I think there's a lot working towards just pushing the player to like maybe go get Charlie first.
Yeah, that was
So
definitely what
you'll
I did
do it.
first.
Yeah, I did too. So you'll do that just to get the shift tab or slab, which is really useful for the whole game and never unequipped the whole game. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
So amusingly enough, I did unequip it once near the end. We'll talk about that when we talk about our final runs, but
yeah,
this is probably a good time to talk about the slabs as a whole. So there are So I
Sure.
mean, you can equip 3. You have your resurrect one that gives you your extra lives, and that you have to equip. So you really only
Yeah.
have a choice of 2 others to equip.
Yep.
And there are 5 you can pick. Let's see how good my memory is. There's shift, which is basically you blink. You like teleport a short distance through the air. It's like blink from Dishonored. Then there's Nexus, which allows you to link together multiple targets within a that are close to each other, and then whatever happens to one happens to all of them. So you cast Nexus on a bunch of people, shoot one in the head, and they all die. Um, then there is Aether is the stealth one, the invisible one. So
Cloaking.
yeah, that's your cloaking. Then there's the 2 I rarely use, and I'm going to struggle remembering the names. Havoc.
Havoc. Yep.
Is Havoc your like really your guns blazing makes you stronger for that if you're doing that? Like
It specifically blocks you from taking damage, I think, is the
okay,
main thing it does.
so it makes you
It,
harder.
it
I
makes
just
you a
remember,
tank. It makes you a tank.
yeah, I just remember reading that one and being like, oh, that's if you're like just planning on getting in a lot of fights, and that's not how I was playing normally. So
Yeah,
I
I
literally
did.
never
I
used that one.
did just pull up the description. It says it does increase your damage
Yeah,
and protect you from harm. So yeah, it's the combat one.
yeah. I just remember reading that and being like, oh, this is all for combat.
I used it
Um,
a lot.
I'm sorry.
I used that one a lot.
Oh, nice. It was probably really good. I mean, it's funny because I actually did a lot of combat, but I also just found the combat pretty easy, and I really liked
Yeah.
the other abilities. So I just always took those over Havoc. And I'm sure if I thought about it for another minute, I could remember the 5th one, but I'm just gonna let you go
It's
ahead and tell me.
Kinesis, which is basically
Oh yeah,
telekinesis. You can throw guys around.
that's your force push.
Yeah, it's your force push.
Um,
Seems really bad. I only tried it once or twice.
yeah, it was really annoying to fight a visionary who had it because it just flung
Yes.
you around. But
Whenever
yeah,
Julianna pops in and has Carnesis, I'm like, oh my god, just go away. Because you're just flying around and you get so disoriented.
yeah, it was more, and that's why it's annoying. It was more disorienting than actually a threat. Like
Yeah.
I never felt threatened by it. It just made the fight take longer because you're just getting disoriented over and over.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tried that one once and I was like, I never want to use this. So in my 2 slots that I could choose, it was always Shift, Nexus, and Aether. I use those 3 a lot.
Yeah. I didn't really use Aether at all. I used Shift the whole game. I used Nexus probably the second most, and then Havoc I used a decent amount.
Yeah, so replace Havoc with Aether, and that was my ordering as
Yeah.
well. Shift most, then Nexus. So we're team Shift Nexus here.
Yeah.
Um,
Nexus is definitely second best to shift, in my opinion.
yeah, Aether I got a lot of good use out of, and it's actually pretty powerful with some of the upgrades, and can really make you like just be able to walk past a lot of people or get through sticky situations where
Yeah, I could see that being useful in just populated areas that you just need to get past, and like it doesn't really matter if you clear them or not. I could see that just being helpful to skip sections.
yeah, and it was even helpful in areas where I wanted to take people down, but like the way you enter the area is not really ideal. It could just help you get into a better position.
Yeah.
And there were a couple times late game where I actually did drop shift and used Aether and Nexus, and I felt like that was like the ultimate stealth combo
Yeah.
because you could like really use Aether to get in the best position to pop off a Nexus.
Hmm.
And I felt
Just
like I
clear a
could,
room.
yeah, I felt like I could pretty reliably either sneak through or clear rooms with that and just never get into gunfights.
Yeah, that makes sense. Carnesis
But
was nice, or not Carnesis. Havoc is nice just because I am bad at stealth and like
mhm,
assumed that I was going to get into a firefight at some point on any given map, no
yeah,
matter what my objective was. And so I would just pull out my shotgun and turn on Havoc and just run through guys.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, if Havoc is powerful, which it sounds like it is, like I could definitely see that being useful because I also was not great at the stealth and got into gunfights all the time. But the reason I never actually used Havoc is because I never felt like I needed it. Like I felt like the game was still pretty easy, and like even if you got into a gunfight, like if you got really swarmed, yeah, you would go down quick.
Yeah.
But I felt like if I recognized I was getting really swarmed, I would just fall back and kind of let them reset.
Yeah,
Which,
I definitely had times where, like, if you don't have a bunch of the character upgrade trinkets to increase your like health and damage protection and stuff, you die
Mhm.
pretty quick. You do have the 3 lives as your like main saving grace,
Yeah,
um,
which I made
but
use of.
like, yeah, you if there's like 7 guys shooting at you, you're toast pretty quickly if you are engaging them at all.
Yeah, if
So
they all have
I often would just kind of pop Havoc and just run out because as long as it's active, you basically don't take damage. It takes down your power instead of your health. It basically
yeah,
doubles your health, I guess,
yeah,
is the one way to
acts like
think
a
about it.
shield.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I do think it was amusing to hear you say bust out your shotgun because I'm curious what weapons you use because I feel like the shotguns are very OP. And
Shotguns are amazing.
yeah, I had because you can bring 3 weapons, and my loadout was always a shotgun, a silenced pistol for stealth, and then the third weapon didn't matter because if I was going loud, it was going to be my shotgun. I usually
hmm
brought one of those rifle things, like the long range thing, as my third weapon. Um, but yeah,
Yeah,
like
my
the shot.
third,
Oh, go ahead.
I did the same thing you did. Silenced pistol and shotgun, and my third weapon was always the special sniper rifle, which I stumbled upon pretty early.
Mm.
The legendary sniper rifle.
Yeah, I actually stumbled upon that really late, and I didn't. At that point, I was so used to, I forget what the class of guns is called that's kind of treated as the sniper guns. They're
The
not actually sniper rifles, but
the rapier. Is that what it was? It
yeah,
doesn't
it's
have a
like,
scope on it, but it has one shot in the magazine.
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was it. Which was pretty accurate at range and pretty
yeah,
much a one-hit kill type of weapon.
yeah.
And I found one of those that like reloaded really fast. It was
hmm
like, I also found another one that added some zoom to it. So I think I would toggle between those depending on the map. Um, but yeah, like the shotgun is like, you were talking about like, oh, if 7 guys see you, you're probably dead. But to me, it depended on what kind of the setting was. Cause it's like, oh, if they're
Sure.
like all around me or above me or whatever, it's like, yeah, I needed to just get out. But if it was like me with my back against a wall and guys running at me down a corridor, it could be
Yeah, then you
50
could just
guys.
shred them.
Yeah, it could be 50 guys and I'm going to fire 3 shotgun shells and they're all going to die.
Yes, it definitely.
So it really depended on the situation. I felt like I could usually maneuver into a advantageous situation. Not always, but usually. Um, yeah, that shotgun, and you get some like. So, all right, this game is a straight up loot game. So you get,
Yes.
there's all these different classes of weapons, and then at the purple, and then they're color coded. So you get what, white, green, blue, purple, or is it
Okay.
just 3 tiers? There's either three or
think
four
it's
tiers.
I think it's just 3. I think it's regular white, then the green, and then purple, and then gold for the unique weapons.
Yeah, which I only found, I think, 2 unique weapons.
Yeah, I only found 2. I think there's only 4 in the game. What I'm looking at on this wiki.
Gotcha. Yeah, I only found 2 or 3. Um, but yeah, and then like the purples have special abilities on them. So like for a certain shotgun, there might be like 2 or 3 different special abilities that it can have. And then you
Yeah.
also get weapon trinkets, I guess they're called. They're like weapon mods basically, and every weapon can have up to 3, I think, depending on their rarity, 2 or 3. Um,
Mhm.
The higher rarity ones have more slots, and then your character can also equip up to 4 character trinkets. And all of the trinkets, the weapon and character ones, have rarity. So you're collecting all of this stuff. All of it can be infused. Um,
Less rare guns also jam more, which is always super annoying.
oh, I actually don't know that I ever had a gun jam.
Yeah, if you get higher rarity guns, they don't. I think the purple ones don't jam at all ever.
Okay.
And it's like white ones jam pretty often, and green ones sometimes jam, and then purple ones don't at all. But like at the very early part of the game, when you're just kind of working with whatever you have, it felt like every firefight they would just be like a spam square to unjam this gun.
Huh. Maybe, yeah, maybe I just didn't notice when it happened, but I don't remember that being a big thing. Or maybe I just got, well, I did get a purple gun very quickly because Charlie's shotgun is purple.
Yeah,
And he was one of the first things I did was kill Charlie, and that's literally the shotgun I used for the rest of the game. Um,
that's the same one I used. I think that's the one. It slows people when you hit them with it.
yeah, I
Yeah,
think so.
yeah. I used that the whole game.
Yeah, and I put some mods on it that like extended its range and made it more accurate, and also would like pierce through people. So like it really just shredded through enemies. And like the rate of fire on that thing is also really fast. So I mean,
The magazine is huge, so
yeah,
you barely ever have to reload.
yeah, it was like 20 or 30
Yeah.
shots in it. Um, yeah, so I don't know how you felt about the loot overall. I've got very tired by the end of the game of like getting through a zone, and it's the standard loot game thing of like you just have a screen full of trinkets you've picked up and it's sorting through them and figuring out which ones you want to keep, which ones you want to convert to residuum, and all of that stuff got very tiring to me by halfway through the
Yeah.
game, if not earlier.
Yeah, it ends up being feel very weak at the beginning. You ramp up very quick, having stuff you like, confused, and then it became like, okay, I just trash almost everything every time I leave an area. And it's not like it took a lot of time or effort, but yeah, it was kind of after, I don't know, 10 hours, I was like, okay, I don't need to engage with the system anymore. I have what I want.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what this whole area between the loot and kind of the progression and everything. I feel like this is one of the areas that I just never got into, and I don't know if it's just a balance thing or what, but yeah, like you commented in there that you start very weak and then ramp up very quickly. And there was a brief window near the beginning where I'm like, you know, it's kind of that standard video gamey thing of like feeling more powerful because you're getting stuff.
Yeah.
But I got, like I said, when I got Charlie's shotgun, I used it the rest of the game. So like you very quickly get very powerful stuff that like I just never changed. It's like I used shift the whole game. I used his shotgun the whole game. Once I found a silenced pistol, I used it the whole game. Um, so like it really doesn't take long to kind of get those key pieces that you just don't really need to change. So like
Mhm.
I feel like that whole, because I feel like when you're doing like a loot game type of thing, like that really only works if you're like constantly getting new fun stuff like that you're looking forward to
Yeah.
and that you're excited to get. And I just never got that from this game. Like, so it just felt weird. Is like it felt like they went halfway in that progression, loot, whatever direction, and but not really. So I don't know. Like
Mhm.
that felt like a just an odd part of the game to me that never really worked.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it really works. I don't didn't detract anything for me. I just mostly ignored it after the first little bit.
Hmm. Um, we've kind of gone back and forth a lot around a bunch of different random things. Um,
Yep.
maybe we'll go ahead and talk about like our final run, like how it wrapped up, and then um, got a couple other miscellaneous topics. So I don't actually have a ton to say about my final run. I feel like actually that, especially if you're following the waypoints, but I think even if you're just doing it on your own, there's really basically just one way that the solution comes together. Like it's really just one
Yeah,
solution.
there is one solution, as far as I can tell, unless somebody finds something weird that is not. There's clearly one intended solution.
Hmm.
that the game just gives you.
Yeah, I think
Um,
within that solution, there's slight wiggle room in the sense of
yeah,
like what we were saying about like, oh, how you kill Alexis, like it doesn't really
yes,
matter. So like in the final run, you can kind of kill Alexis in multiple different ways, but
as
um,
well as the other people at his party.
yes. But like other than a couple little minor things like that, like you have to go through very specific steps in terms of what day do you go to at what time and what triggers you have to hit to make sure people go to the right places. Like there's only one way through that.
Yeah,
Which I guess how do you feel about there being only one solution? Like do you wish there
I
had
didn't.
been more? Did you have the impression that there could be multiple solutions, or do you think it works just to have, basically the whole game as one puzzle with one solution?
It worked fine for me. I didn't mind it. Could. I totally expect and understand if somebody was disappointed by that. If you thought of this game as a big open world puzzle box, okay, like we get the pitch of the game. I think is you're trapped on this island in this infinite loop. You have to kill 7 people before the day ends. Figure out how to do it. Sounds maybe more open
Hmm.
than it is, but I feel like it works fine because you do all that prep work in any order you want, and you have to kind of piece. Well, I felt like I had to piece things together. Again, if you were going waypoint to waypoint,
Hmm.
I think it could feel a little shallow, probably.
Yeah,
Um,
as someone who went waypoint to waypoint, there's just not really anything to ever think about.
yeah, I felt like I had to figure things out and put some things together sometimes in a way that didn't feel like it was just the game handing it to me. Um, and doing that final loop was satisfying to me. Um, and think, given what the game does and what they're going for with their narrative and like trying to introduce you to the characters and set up that final loop in the way they do, I almost think, given all of that, past the initial pitch, I think it's almost a too tall of an order, like too big of an ask to think it could have been any other way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I agree with that. And I think, yeah, I think if they had tried to make a like other solution, like I think it would have been cool if they could have pulled it off. Like I think that would have
If
been
they,
amazing.
I guess what I'm saying is if they had pulled it off where you could do it in any number of ways and there weren't any prescribed ways to do it, then this would be like game design of all time kind of a situation. Like
Yeah.
it would be super impressive.
Yeah, and yeah, I agree if they could do it like in the way I'm imagining it in my head at least, where it is this very big open thing and
Right.
there's multiple ways to do it, but presumably any way you do it feels clever and earned and all that. Like,
And narratively cohesive and like gives you what they wanted you to get out of the game. Like I feel like if they pulled that off, then it would be
mhm.
top game of all time kind of situation.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, that's maybe a little bit of a stretch, but yeah, it would be it would certainly be way more impressive than it is and very impressive overall. Like,
yeah.
and I think there was some like I don't think what they did was like I'm totally okay with there being only one solution. Like, and I think
Mhm.
I think you're right that like with kind of how many puzzle pieces there are in this to fit together, like it would be really hard to do multiple solutions. But I do think they kind of pitched. I think in the way it was kind of pitched and sold, I think it was presented kind of, maybe not fully, but at least more open than it was. Like I think it was presented as more of a do it your own way kind of thing, especially with all the talk of
Yeah.
it being an immersive sim is like I don't even know that I think this game is an immersive sim really because it's like there really is only one way to go. It's like, you don't really have a ton of freedom in how you, I mean, you can choose kind of what order you do things in as you're like doing all the setup bits, but
Yeah,
um,
I think the immersive sim stuff comes in the meat of you playing game and seeing the levels and exploring and how much extra lore and like characterization do you get into, and
sure.
like I think that is the immersive sim part, and that final run is it's not an immersive sim in that final run. It is an execution of a linear narrative structure to reach the ending using the tools you've earned throughout the game, basically. Like,
Yeah. And I think also like if you think of something like the recent Hitman games where you do kind of have more like they are more open in terms of how you pull stuff off in those levels. I think I had an idea in my head of like, oh, this is going to be like Hitman levels of like clockwork machinery that you can kind of tweak and manipulate and like really dig into in a whole bunch of different ways. But it's really not that. It's really more limited than that, which in some
yeah,
ways was kind of a bummer. In other, but I also totally understand it because, you know, Hitman individual levels are self-contained in a way that they aren't in Deathloop. So like it's certainly easier to pull that off in a hit, like for them to create that a Hitman level. But for
yeah,
whatever reason, I kind of had that in my head. That felt like the promise, and it pretty quickly became apparent like, oh, this is not that, not that game. And then I was fine with it. I mean, because even if you think of something like, you know, an Outer Wilds or other time loop games, like there's, you know, there's only one way to beat these kinds of games, really.
right.
Um,
I mean, the final run in Outer Wilds is just as prescribed as the final run
yes,
in Deathloop.
yes. And I can totally see how in, you know, in both games cases they're pretty different games, but I can totally
Yeah,
see why like you would have a single final solution in each of them. Um,
sure.
so yeah, that doesn't bother me too much, but it was I think especially with the great reception this game got beforehand, like a lot of places giving it perfect tens and such. So I think maybe I was expecting it, like it makes sense what they did, but I think maybe I was expecting it to go above and beyond a little more. Um,
Sure.
so not the biggest deal. Um, yeah, which is why I say I don't have a whole lot to say about my final run because I don't know, you kind of do the prescribed thing, right? Like
Yeah.
you just kind of do the thing. Um,
I actually failed the final loop
okay.
at Alexis's party.
Okay. Alexis's party was the part I was worried about because like there are three people there and there are a lot
Three
of
people
guards
there,
there.
a lot of guards there, and I had never practiced or done the party with the extra people there.
Hmm.
I didn't know where they would be or if there was going to be some special way to access them. I wasn't using any waypoints. I just knew that they were there, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And so it was pretty nerve-wracking. And I also had this thing, and I wonder if your experience is the same, because I feel like this is coded into the game, and it drove me crazy. Every time I got to Alexis's party and got up on the roof, Julianna would come in.
No.
Every single time.
So yeah, we haven't talked about Juliana at all. Did you ever play this game online?
Oh,
Okay. So you and I both did single player mode only for Juliana, which I feel like trying to make progress in this game with a human
would be
Juliana
rough.
would just be maddening. Like I
Yeah,
feel like
the two reasons I didn't play online is because I knew it would make the game a lot harder,
Mhm.
and because you can't pause if you're on online mode, and I have young children who are in bed when I'm playing, and I can't pause very.
Yes.
Then that's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I just kind of didn't want to deal with it because it felt like it would, yeah, just make the game longer and more infuriating. Like, you know, like I don't mind sparring with someone in multiplayer, but I feel like if you're trying to complete objectives and she pops up at the exact wrong moment, which it sounds like happened to you a lot at Alexis's castle, then it can just derail your entire plan. And I feel like that's kind of frustrating. But for me, for whatever, like Juliana invaded me all the time. but for some reason it always seemed to happen like earlier in the level. Like, and
Mm,
Alexis's thing is way at the back of Updom. Like it takes a little bit to
yeah,
get there. So like she invaded me all the time when I was going to Alexis, but she just always did it before I got there.
yeah. It was always I'd get in the party, start skulking around, and then she would come in, be like, "I'm coming for you, Colt."
Yeah.
And it's like, since she's the AI, like I never really had trouble killing her. If
Hmm.
I was in a really bad position, sometimes she would get me once first.
Yeah.
But since you have the reprisal, I would just come back and then finish her off.
Yeah.
But the problem was that can't deal with her without going super loud.
Yes.
And so if I'm in the middle of this party where I'm trying to be stealthy, trying to find where the extra characters are that I've never seen in this map at this time of day before, then she
Hmm.
showed up at this end of this final loop and I'm stressed because I've done the whole day perfectly up to this point and
Hmm.
then I'm trying to find these extra people and I actually saw them. They were on a dance party on the roof.
Yeah.
I was looking at them with with my sniper rifle, trying to figure out how to get them. And she comes in, and I just panicked and like flung myself off the roof and died once, and then came back in and tried to fight her and got killed once, and then I ended up killing her, and then just like in this extremely long gunfight with the whole party, killed all of the visionaries.
Uh-huh.
And I was just so stressed out.
Yeah.
And I was trying to run. I was on my last life, and like at that point, just the hordes were descending, and I ended up just like getting gunned down on the way trying to get to the exit. It
Hmm.
was very disheartening.
You remember what slabs you had equipped during that?
I was pretty sure it was Shift
Shift
and
and X.
Nexus.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like throwing Nexus around, just like blasting people with my shotgun, trying to just like w
There
wade through the hordes.
there are
But
so many
eventually, I
people at
just
that party though.
yeah,
Yeah, like
eventually, and it seemed like it was just infinite spawning guys, like that.
yeah,
It was to that level.
I'd be really curious about that because including on my final run, I got into large scale gunfights at his party multiple times, and every time it was just like this is never like there's just so many people coming.
I even got out of the party and was like headed towards the exit, going through the city area, and they were just coming out of everywhere. Like I was like, "This is nuts! I've killed like 100 guys."
Yeah, yeah, there's a lot of them there. It's wild, yeah, because the couple times I went in there before the final run, like I would be trying to do it stealthy and fine. And also that complex is huge. Like
Mhm.
that complex feels as big as like some of the other entire levels.
Mhm.
Like some of the smaller levels. Like it's crazy huge and like I never explored all of it because like it's hard to explore it freely just because there's so many people everywhere in there. So like I kind of found one route that mostly worked and stuck with it. If I were to execute it perfectly, it would have worked, but I rarely did. But
Yeah.
yeah, so as I was going through the final day, the final loop, I was fortunate enough to do it on my first
Yeah.
go, but I also didn't have to deal with Juliana at a bad time. Um,
It was the most stressed out. Well, that and the reactor were the two times that I was like just super stressed out by this game. The way that
yeah,
I think it it worked because the stakes were high and I was like very
yeah.
intensely
Ah,
in the situation. So like it worked for me, but yeah.
yeah,
Anyway.
I think I would have enjoyed this game a lot more if there was less to it. Like if it wasn't as long as it is, and it's not even the longest game, but like if it involved less repetition and grinding,
Hmm.
but then had more tense moments because I think the
Yeah.
most fun I had in the game were the moments that were more tense, like the reactor, and I was also kind of tense during my final day because I didn't want to screw it up, when you
Yeah.
got to the third or fourth part of the day. And I knew the Alexis part at the end was going to be the toughest part.
Yeah, they
Um,
clearly set that up as like the final challenge of the game to kill
yeah,
three people at once in this very high security situation at the end of the day.
yeah. Um, I'd like to see. I'd be curious to see because I think there's a trophy for this, but I'm sure there's a way to like go through, only kill the visionaries, not get seen by anyone else, not get discovered, like just a very
That would
clean
be,
stealth run of that
yeah,
part.
that would be
Um,
intense. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a way to do it.
Mhm.
But yeah, as I was going through the final day, I was like, because I had done all of the individual pieces before, like I kind of knew what was up, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna each of the 4 time chunks of the day, I'm gonna make my loadout appropriate for what I need to do. It was like make it as geared as possible towards that. Um, which the first 3 chunks of the day it was shift and then either Nexus or Aether, whichever I thought would be more helpful. And then I think I might have changed my guns slightly or something. I pretty much always had the same character trinkets. I always had one that increased max health a lot, one that increased max energy a lot, and one that reduced damage taken a lot. Like those three were pretty constant, and I think I varied the other one a little bit. Like I put on the one that makes you immune to gas for the Harriet part, just in case I fell into the gas. Um, I forget what my other normal one there was. Oh, I think it was something that makes you more silent was my common fourth one.
Not the double jump.
No, I scrapped the double jump. I never. You have blink. You don't need to jump. Um,
Interesting. I never even considered taking off the double jump. It probably isn't that useful, but I just was always like, well, I want to be able to double jump. This is a video
yeah,
game. You
yeah,
double jump in video games.
yeah. At one point, I had enough character trinkets that I thought were good, and I just tried. I might have actually accidentally sacrificed my double jump for infusion or something, but
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, you re-get it. That's the one thing you re-get at the start of every run, whether you've infused it or not. Um,
Yeah.
but anyway, yeah, at some point I did a loadout without a double jump because I really wanted 4 other things. Didn't miss it.
Yeah.
Like I took it off
It's
once and it was
probably
like,
true.
yeah, I took it off once. I was like, I like when I took it off, I'm like, I don't think I've double jumped that much because I already had shift with the extended range on it, and I'm like, if I need to get up high, I can just shift up there. Like,
Yeah. That's
and
funny.
yeah, and then I took it off, didn't miss it. I'm like, well, I'm not going to put it back on unless I feel a need for it, and never needed it again.
Yeah. I basically played the whole game with shift and double jump as like fixed that could not be changed, and I probably should have reevaluated that at some point.
Yeah. So the one moment I reevaluated shift, so in my final run, I got to the 4th time section of the day, which is where you go to Updom to, go to Lexus's party. And I was like, the way I've been playing this section and, the previous times where I've done it, I've really wanted Aether for the stealth. Like there have been multiple times where I've really wanted that. I've also gotten a lot of good use out of Nexus, and if I happen to get into the party part, like that's probably going to be really useful. And I was thinking, and I remember thinking it through, I'm like, I don't think I really need shift. I think I can get through this part without shift. So I took Aether and Nexus and not shift. I think it was like the only time I didn't take shift. So I get, into his castle. I get into that room above the main gathering area where you can like go across the rafters.
Yeah.
And you can't get across there without shift. And I
Yeah.
didn't think about that. And I was like,
You might
huh,
be able to with double jump.
you might be able to with double jump, but I didn't have double jump or shift. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to have to improvise. I've gone through the
Yeah.
whole final loop, and all of a sudden, the way I used to do this, I couldn't do anymore. So I was like,
It's very funny.
oh, okay. So I like went back out and like started like walking around some outdoor like walkways up high and stuff. And I was
Hmm.
like, I think I can actually just walk around here and get to that same spot through this outside door. Um, and I actually do a pretty good job of this. Like I, spend a couple minutes like maneuvering around. I like take some people out with my silent pistol and Nexus and that kind of stuff. And I'm on this balcony and I had just shot someone in the head with my silenced pistol and I hear like a voice clip to my right and I immediately whip around and someone had opened a door and was like reacting to me there and was about to like shoot me or whatever. Like
Hmm.
someone was just on their AI patrol path and opened the door that was right next to me. And I just like pure reflex, just quick, 90-degree turn, locked in on the head, shot the headshot with my silenced pistol, fortunately before they fired a shot,
Huh.
and immediately get the notification that I had just killed Alexis.
Nice.
So, It
Like,
was
well, that
the
was easy.
Yeah, I was like, oh, okay, I guess I don't have to go through with the rest of this. But it turns out there was someone else in that hallway who saw his body die.
Mhm.
So then that spawned this whole like, alerting people and had to go loud. And I was like, man, like what a coincidence that like this random person who popped through the door happened to be Alexis.
That's great.
Um, and I had to fight through a bunch of guards to kill the other people at his party
Yeah, yeah.
after that. But yeah, that was really funny. Um, so I guess what did you think of all the ending stuff? Like once you actually do all that and then you like launch yourself to this satellite dish or whatever the thing you launch yourself to and like
From Juliana.
yeah, meet Juliana for the final little, which wasn't actually a fight, but kind of the final
No.
conversation and such.
I thought it was fine. It's a pretty quick ending. Gives you a couple of choices, which I haven't actually watched video of the other endings, but I did read what the options lead to, kind of.
Wait, so there are other endings?
Yeah, there are three endings, I think.
What determines your ending?
So you get the choice of whether to kill Juliana or not.
Oh, so it's like the final choice.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And then when you kill her, you get the choice to kill yourself or not, basically. So that
Hmm.
leads to three possibilities.
Gotcha. Well, so what did you do?
I did the fully break the loop thing of kill her and myself.
Okay, that's what I did. I assume kill yourself
Yeah,
is just jumping off the platform.
off at the end.
Yeah, that's what
So
I did.
that seems to break the loop, but you don't really get anything past that. You see that they survive and the loop starts over, but it's a different day.
Hmm.
So that the loop is broken, but they are still alive. And then she kind of just like walks away from you, and that's the end. The other ones, apparently, if you don't kill her, get a scene of them starting the loop together, and it's like we're gonna be buddies now, kind of thing. Like, and keep playing in the loop
Okay.
instead of breaking it. Um, I forget what exactly happens if you kill her and then don't kill yourself. But yeah, anyway, those are the three options. Like you reinsert yourself back into the loop, I guess, at that point.
Right. Yeah, the ending seemed just very abrupt. Um,
Yeah, it's a little abrupt for sure.
yeah, and I guess this is also the time to talk about just the story as a whole. Like, I don't feel like I got really anything out of the story as a whole. Like, it felt very, I don't know, like it was so many like quick fire snarky comments and like,
The game does not take itself seriously is probably one thing to say outright. Like there is
yeah,
a story and the characters have like stories and motivations and relationships with each other, and you can kind of uncover as much or as little of that as you care about looking for. But yeah, on its face, the game is like pretty jokey, pretty not serious.
mhm.
And so it's really just like if you want to engage with this stuff, that's fine, but we're just here to like shoot guns and do cool stuff, kind of a feeling.
Yeah, it definitely felt to me more like window dressing kind of stuff. Like it, like they made the game idea and like I don't know, tried to put something kind of fun around it, kind of goofy and fun around it.
Hmm.
And I don't know, and like there were moments where it almost tried to make it a little more serious, like the relationship between Colt and Juliana specifically, but I don't know,
Yeah,
it
and I
just
think some
never.
of that stuff is sort of interesting, but yeah, it didn't. I mean,
I think
it's
mainly just
possible they
the
could.
tone of the
They
game for me.
yeah, yeah. The tone doesn't really set the stage for anything serious.
Yeah.
Um, Even though I think that yeah, that stuff's kind of interesting to think about a little bit, but I don't think it is like anything to spend a lot of time on particularly.
Yeah. And I don't think I was expecting like, a good story that I was gonna really get into. Like that's not what I was expecting from this game either. But I guess for how much dialogue there was, I was like, eh, I wish I enjoyed a little more of this than I do.
I did not enjoy it. I thought some of the back and forth between Colt and Julianna is pretty funny or endearing in its own kind of very silly way, but I
Uh,
I think there was enough there that I like paid attention to the stuff that I did come across, but I didn't feel a need to go hunting for more information by the time I was done.
mhm. That makes sense. Um, we don't want to go too much longer here, but um, just to, I guess this will be my complaining about technical items block.
Yeah, it sounds like you had a real a real host of technical issues that I
Yeah,
somehow avoided.
yeah, and I'm sure this is totally a like luck of the draw, as a lot of times bugs can be, is like
Yeah.
um some people are going to run into it more than others, but yeah, I mean the worst stuff was just the crashes. I had the game straight up crash twice, which in the middle of a day or run is not,
Oh, that
is
would
not
suck.
fun. The checkpoint, like it only saves between time chunks, so could be worse, could be better. It's not the end of the world. It's like, oh, if you spend 20 minutes in a level, you go back to the start of that level. You don't have to start the whole day over at least. It's
Yeah.
just that time chunk, but you lose anything you did in that time chunk. Um, so that's frustrating. But yeah, it crashed twice. One time I got stuck this was the weirdest one. I got stuck in the menu and I couldn't
Hmm.
leave the menu, and like a lot of the stuff in the menu wasn't even visible, but even just pressing the back button wouldn't leave the menu.
Right.
And I,
So
I just
weird.
had to, quit. I just had to hard reboot myself. Um,
Mm.
had a moment where the frame rate just like dropped to like single digits, it felt like. For a couple seconds and was like, what's going on here? Like, I'm just teleporting around right now. I don't know what's happening. It was during a gunfight too, so I ended up dying. Um, uh, so, I mean, those are the bad ones, um, which happened a handful of times. Otherwise, really, it's just like, oh, this. Otherwise, it was just like a lot of AI wonkiness, I guess, is what I'd say. Of like,
Mhm. Yeah.
oh, this AI is just walking into a wall constantly and not moving. Like that happened to me a lot. Or um one point I was having a shootout with someone, and they were just like they were behind, a chest high wall somewhere, and they were just constantly ducking and unducking like rapid fire. Like they were clearly
Hmm.
like just their AI routine busted entirely. And just pathing stuff of people walking into weird things or clipping or whatever, like kind of your normal video game bugs. It's just those things happened a lot. It felt like,
Hmm.
um, which I guess leads me into like less bug stuff and more like, I mean, obviously the bugs are bad, and for a modern AAA game in 2021, I feel like that's like we're past the point of that being like very acceptable. Um,
Hmm.
maybe that's just my stance. But I
Hmm.
think more than that, and I'm curious what your take is on this, of like this game was kind of billed as, one of the big PS5 console exclusives this year. Like it's not on PS4. Um, and I don't think this, like, I think this game could be on PS4. Like, I don't think this game felt like a PS5 game.
Yeah, I would guess it probably could run on PS4. Obviously, they'd have to do more optimization work probably, but
Hmm.
yeah, I would be surprised if it wasn't possible to run on a PS4.
Yeah, like, unless there's something fancy going on with like some internal processing with the game's whatever, like, But I
Yeah,
don't think there's anything in that game that felt that intense. I mean, like all those Hitman games were on PS4 and like it doesn't seem
right.
any more intense than those, but like visually, I don't think it looked fine. Like it didn't look bad.
Yeah, it looks good, I think, but it's not a marquee showstopper visual showpiece kind of game.
Yeah, and I think I played PS4 games that looked better. Like,
Right.
I mean, most of the PS4 games that look better are like your Last of Us Part 2s that are more linear. So like it's a different
Yeah.
kind of game that's easier to make look better. But
Hmm.
like my point is like I didn't look at this game and like the feel of this game and how it ran, like just all of it put together. It just didn't feel like a PS5 like it was making use of all of that stuff.
Sure.
Um, and also, this game has loading screens. It's the first PS5 game that doesn't load instantly. Like, it actually had pretty long loading screens. And to me, that was a really big bummer of like, man, like, I thought we were done with loading screens, and here I am playing a PS5 console exclusive. Like, after we've played Miles Morales and the Demon Souls remake and Ratchet and Clank and like all these PS5 games that have no loading screens that also look better than this game, and you're like, man, this game looks worse than those and has loading screens. Like, what are we doing? This is terrible. Like, in the grand scheme of things, some of that shouldn't really matter, but it also just made this game feel like a cheap product to me. Like,
Right.
I don't know. And I think when combined with the bugs, it's just like, man, this
Hmm.
game is just kind of a technical mess. Like, if I just think of this game from a pure technical standpoint, like it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
um,
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't have any of the major bug issues that you talked about, and it didn't, for whatever reason, it just never occurred to me to like notice loading screens or anything about like I wasn't thinking about it as like this is disappointing as a PS5 game. I mean, I wouldn't say you're wrong. It just I wasn't that wasn't something I was on my radar or I thought about while I was playing. I was mostly just enjoying the game.
yeah, and different people are going to have their different priorities on that,
Yeah.
and like the loading screens were long enough to be noticeable, and they weren't short, but they also weren't like your Bloodborne PS4 level loading screens that are like a minute long. Like
Yeah.
they weren't that bad, but they were
Uh,
bad enough to be noticeable, and I got tired of them. So yeah, I think it's just weird to me that this is a PS5, like not on
mhm.
PS4. So yeah, like that stuff bothered me, like in total bothered me a lot. Just like it just technically was just weird all over the place. And I guess also like I don't know if you lump this in the same category, but the AI in the game is really bad.
The
Um,
AI is really bad in a very silly and almost humorous way. I didn't. It's one of these things I feel like I keep saying. I didn't mind it because I had fun just like being the powerhouse cult playing against these dumb guys who will run after candy if you drop it in front of them.
yeah, like in some ways I don't mind the bad AI either because like it's kind of meant to be that playgroundy kind of
Right,
like
yeah.
you're the you're on your power fantasy, like you're the super powered, like unstoppable
Yeah.
force that like, it's kind of like, we've referenced Hitman a lot, with Hitman, the AI reliably chases the coin every time you toss it down. Like that AI
Right.
is not necessarily great either, but I think it's just another thing that like both technically felt, I mean, this game isn't as rigid as in its rules as Hitman is. Like Hitman's AI is clearly designed for a gameplay purpose.
Yeah.
Um, I think this game, they more just felt dumb, which
They're just kind of dumb. They're just kind of obstacles in your way that you can tackle however you feel like.
yeah. But anyway, there's kind of my rant on the technical stuff. And I
Yeah.
guess, do you have anything else before we get to final thoughts?
I don't think so.
Um, so yeah, I guess we'll head towards wrapping this up. And what are your final overall takeaways from the game and final
Yeah,
thoughts
I
and
mean,
feelings?
oh, I think it's probably pretty clear that I overall liked it a lot. Think that I haven't always gotten into immersive sims or even arcane specific immersive sims, but Um, the way that
For Prey.
I did really like Prey, but I've never been into Dishonored, which this game is more close to Dishonored probably than Prey.
Yeah.
Um,
So Prey is an immersive sim by Arcane, but yes, I do agree that this feels
yeah.
more like Dishonored.
For whatever reason, I think the structure of this one worked for me. I liked having the loop structure and the revisiting locations at different times and really trying to learn the maps and complete different objectives in this changing world and kind of piece together where to go and what to do with each of those, like building that final loop and then those moments of tension that we talked about that really worked for me. Made that kind of losing progress structure really work. Wish that I could have used a few more of those probably to really set this game over the top. The core gameplay I liked. I like good at the stealth, but I enjoyed trying it. Even after I would fail, I would enjoy going into the next run, trying it again, and learning from it. Gunfights were at least average, or sometimes a little better than average if it was a tense situation. Yeah, I thought it was a strong game overall.
Yeah. I am not being facetious when I say this. I'm genuinely glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, I know.
I think I don't know how what my tone has actually been like through this podcast. I don't know how well this is
I
clear
think
to
we've been
anyone.
pretty up and down across the
Yeah.
board. Yeah, there's good and bad for sure. This is not a perfect game, and it is not a terrible game either, I think.
Yeah. It does have, so I mean, where I'm heading with this is I was ultimately pretty disappointed with the game, and that doesn't mean there
Sure.
aren't things about it that I didn't like. Like
Yeah.
there are things about it that I think are interesting and or there are moments that I enjoyed. I think the longer it went on, the more I got really tired of certain things. I got like repeating different areas, like the kind of lack of more interesting progression or like just sifting through all the loot, like all of that got really repetitive. I think things like what we mentioned at the end, like the AI not being great, like I think got,
Mm.
as the game goes on, you're like, like, what does any of this, mean? Like, there's kind of no tension to anything, and like a lot of the gunfights, like I talked about earlier, were pretty trivial. Like, it's a fairly easy game overall, and maybe some of the boringness I could have solved with not following the waypoints. I think it's
Some, but probably not all. I mean, that doesn't change anything about character progression or AI. So, like,
yeah, I think
those are still issues if you had issues with those.
Yeah, and what I was about to say is I think there's just as good a chance that playing without the waypoints could have exacerbated some of those issues to me
Uh
because
huh.
I would have just
Yeah.
had to spend more time with all of it.
Yeah, you do have to. It does take longer. Like, I don't know what my playtime was, but my playtime on this game was significantly longer than what every reviewer was saying this game was.
Yeah, I actually felt like mine was longer than what reviewers were saying, and I did follow waypoints. And I don't know if that was just because I spent a little time, like I did go through and get all the slabs before I started following the visionary
Right.
loop. I don't know if that is what added time for me or if I just play games slowly in general. I don't know. Um, but yeah, I did feel like I was ready to be done with this game a good probably 5, maybe 10 hours before I was done with it. So I think anything that increased the length of the game would probably not have helped me enjoy it. Um, and I think even past that, we didn't hit on some of this, but I guess like the immersive siminess of it, so to speak. And maybe this is revealing me not to be that big of an immersive sim guy because I didn't even like Prey as much as you. Like
Right.
I thought Prey was fine, but I didn't love it as much as a lot of people did, and I didn't get into Deathloop. I didn't really like Deathloop at all.
Mm.
Um, so maybe this is just closing an arc of me of being like, yeah, I don't know, like a lot of that immersive simi types, what we call immersive sim type stuff, which I don't know if the the bar for that is just you read people's emails on their computer.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we have a perfect definition of that, but at least the arcane style
Yes.
immersive sim doesn't seem to work for you.
Yeah, I'm now pretty much. hmm, I was gonna say 0 for 3 on loving Arcane's games, but I mean I did like Prey well enough. Like,
Mhm.
um, I feel like Deathloop and now this were pretty much full misses. Prey was like a half. I'll say a half miss. Um, so yeah, maybe this is just me being like, yeah, I don't know, these aren't just don't quite do it for me because I guess like
Sure.
when I do like the stealth segments or get into a gunfight or whatever, I'm like, yeah, the stealth is fine. Like the gunfight's fine. Like the kind of the different things you're doing are fine, but I don't feel like I feel like there are other games that do that stuff better. I don't know.
Sure.
Um, anyway, I'm rambling at this point. Like, I think just as the game went on, I kind of got more tired of repeating stuff, and I think some of the stuff we talked about earlier of like there could have been a better like progression or the way they conveyed stuff. Like, I think there could be a way to do a like more like a tighter, more cohesive game that like, you know, maybe doesn't even have waypoints as an option and is just kind of like a tighter puzzle box thing that has more tense moments in it, but is not as long. And I think something like that I would have been a little more into. I feel like the game they ended up with, like, kind of has like a half dozen different systems that they try and piece together at once. And we kind of talked of this being a busy game, and I think
Hmm.
it's trying to piece together a lot of parts that individually feel like not necessarily bad, but also like not amazing on their own, if that makes sense. So it's like, and maybe the give or take on this game is like how well their combination works. It sounds like for you it worked really well, and maybe for me it didn't work as well. And that's probably going to be the
Yeah.
line for a lot of people is like
Yeah.
um, how well those systems that individually are like, you know, this is like kind of standard serviceable stealth, but you know, when you combine a bunch of things that are in that range, like for some people it's probably going to be more than the sum, and for others it's maybe not.
Yeah.
Um, and then I think even with all that though, I probably would have enjoyed it well enough. I think the technical stuff really did in the end kind of like just tilt it more on the like me on the disappoint. I think all of that other stuff by itself I would have been like, kind of in the middle. Like, yeah, I like some things, I didn't like some things, you know, solid middle of
Sure.
the road game. I think the technical stuff is really what kind of like tilted me on the disappointed because yeah, like I definitely had some bugs and I think also it's just not an impressive game on the technical front for a PS5 game. Which I don't
Sure.
know how worth that is getting upset about. I don't know if that makes me an angry internet person, but um, having played some other PS5 games, like some like other true PS5 games, like the Demon Souls remake, Returnal, Ratchet, like there have been some really impressive games. Like I feel like every game I've played on PS5 has been very impressive technically, and this one was a step down on that front,
Hmm.
um, both for bugs and performance and just across the board.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, apologies. That is the end of my spiel. Yeah, I was definitely disappointed with some things about it, but um, I think it's an interesting game.
Yeah. I mean, I
I
think,
wish they had executed it better.
yeah, yeah. Even if you didn't end up liking the execution, I think even though it is sometimes I think you could look at it as like a mismatch of things that it didn't work for you can feel like oh it's just they just bolted all these things together and made a complicated game that isn't executed super well, and I think that's probably the worst look you could have on it. That I don't think it's unfair. I think that I get what you're saying. um I think at the very least it is a game that is not quite like any other game
Mhm.
in its structure and what it's trying to do, and the way it tries to pull that off. Like it's at least doing something new and cool.
Yeah, and I genuinely wanted to like the game. Like I wouldn't
Hmm.
have played it if I didn't, you know, have some level of expectation that I would like it. Um,
Yeah.
So I wish I was you right now. I wish I was like the person
Yeah.
who really liked it.
Yeah,
Um,
for me is like all the pieces that like I can look at and say, yeah, that kind of doesn't really work. It just didn't detract for it like from the overall experience for me. Like I guess I just liked the core gameplay enough and like idea hooked me enough and that just engaging with that it being just kind of a weird game and like the narrative is weird and the tone is weird and like everything's just like I don't know, just kind of weird and different enough that like
yeah,
I was into it. I liked it. And I found it and then engaging enough that like none of those rougher parts ever either didn't occur to me or I would look at it and be like, yeah, I'm just not gonna worry about this part. Like the loot, I just kind of ignored for most of the game.
yeah, yeah. And some of those things individually, like the loot, wasn't the biggest downer, but I think it's kind of like
Yeah,
the additive effect of like a number of those things that are like, this could be better. Oh, this could be, I think it's you get a few too many of those kind of things for me is where it starts to add up.
yeah, for sure.
Who knows if I had had to go through Charlie's LARP dungeon one less time, maybe that would have done it for
Maybe,
me.
maybe.
Maybe that's all it took. But anyway, I think unless you got any final words here, I think it's gonna be a podcast. Um, I've been Flex, joined by Nate, and we have talked a whole lot about Deathloop from Arcane Studios, and that's an episode of the ATACS podcast. We are signing off now, and see you next time.